What if the person you trusted most was hiding a dark secret? What if within the walls of your own home, there was an entire life you never knew existed? Imagine hearing faint cries from the attic, only to discover they belonged to a child you never even knew was yours. How could a mother keep her own baby hidden from the world for years? What kind of life could a child have when their entire existence is confined to the space beneath the bed? Today we uncover the chilling case of a mother's secret in Cheshire, England. A story that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about trust, love, and family. Housevil, true crime involving family. Every family has secrets, any family can cross the line. Hi, I'm Matt, and welcome to Housevil, where we uncover the haunting stories that lie behind closed doors, stories of trust shattered, secrets buried, and lives forever changed. Today we delve into the lives of parents. Let's call them Trisha and Jack, a couple who seem to have it all. A happy home, 2 children, and a quiet life in Cheshire. But beneath the surface of this seemingly ordinary family, a chilling truth festered. Hidden away from the world and even her own father was a third child, their youngest daughter. For 3 long years, she existed in the shadows. Her cries, muffled by blaring music, became the unheard echoes of her suffering. Her fragile body, left weak from neglect, bore the cruel evidence of a life without love or care. And her very existence? A secret so well kept that even those living under the same roof had no idea she was there. What could compel a mother to hide her own child? Was it fear, shame, or something far darker? And how could such a secret remain buried for so long, only to be uncovered by a moment of sheer chance? This is the story of a hidden child, a story of deception, resilience, and the horrifying consequences of neglect. Let's dive into the heartbreaking and deeply unsettling details of this case. In the quiet town of Cheshire, 2020 marked the beginning of a life that would be anything but ordinary. A baby girl entered the world, her cries echoing in the delivery room, a sign of vitality, of life beginning anew. She should have been greeted with love, wrapped in the warmth of her mother's arms, and welcomed into a family that had already embraced her 2 older siblings. But from the very moment she drew her first breath, her fate was decided. She would remain a secret, a hidden shadow of the family she was born into. Her mother, Trisha, made a chilling choice. Unlike her siblings, this baby would never feel the sunlight on her skin or the gentle touch of a loved one. Instead, her world was confined to the attic, a space deliberately isolated from the rest of the house. Beneath the bed in this dark, stifling room, Trisha had constructed a makeshift drawer. This was where the child would live, her prison crafted from wood and silence. Day after day, night after night, the baby lay in that drawer, her needs met in the barest sense. Milk was provided to keep her alive, and her diaper was changed when absolutely necessary. But beyond these basic gestures of survival, there was nothing. No tender lullaby to soothe her, no eye contact to nurture her growing mind, and no touch to assure her of her humanity. To maintain the facade of normalcy, Trisha took extreme measures to ensure the child's existence remained unknown. She declared the attic off limits, a private sanctuary where no one in the family was allowed to venture. To mask any sounds that might escape the hidden drawer, she played loud music almost constantly. For her husband Jack and their 2 older children, this was simply one of Trisha's eccentric habits, of preference for solitude and noise. But for the baby, the relentless music became a cruel soundtrack to her life. It was a barrier not only between her and the rest of the house, but between her and the possibility of rescue. In her silent, hidden existence, the attic walls became her entire universe. Days turned into months, and months stretched into years, with no sign of affection or hope. The attic, with its suffocating darkness and oppressive noise, became the backdrop of her formative years, a place where the light of love and care never reached. Jack had always considered himself a man who understood his family. Life wasn't perfect, but it was predictable. 2 healthy children, a stable job, and a wife who, though more reserved in recent years, still seemed devoted to their home. He had no reason to suspect anything was amiss, no inkling of the secret festering just above their heads. Trisha's increasing secrecy, her insistence that the attic was her space, felt more like a harmless quirk than a warning sign. Why would he question it? But the truth, as it often does, had been lying in wait, ready to shatter the illusion of normalcy Jack had come to trust. It was an unremarkable weekday when the veil began to lift. Jack wasn't feeling well, just a persistent headache and a creeping fatigue, and decided to leave work early. As he stepped into the house, the silence struck him first. Trisha had gone to the supermarket, and the usual cacophony of children playing was absent, with both of them out for the afternoon. Yet more unsettlingly, the muffled thrum of music from the attic, the sound that had become an almost permanent fixture of their home, was missing. At first, Jack welcomed the quiet, retreating to the couch in the living room. But then, faintly, he heard it, a sound. It wasn't loud or alarming, just a faint rustling like something small shifting upstairs. He brushed it off at first, maybe a loose window or an old pipe creaking under pressure. But as he lay there, the noise came again. This time it was unmistakable. Curiosity overpowered his fatigue. Jack stood, his footsteps heavy against the wooden floor as he made his way to the attic door. His hand hovered over the knob for a moment, a flicker of hesitation. Trisha's voice echoed in his mind, "Stay out of the attic. That's my space." It had been an odd request, but nothing he'd ever thought much about. Until now. The door creaked open, revealing the narrow staircase that led to the attic. The air grew cooler as he ascended, and the dim light filtering through a small window did little to dispel the growing unease. The rustling had stopped now, replaced by a silence so profound it felt almost oppressive. At first, everything seemed ordinary. Boxes stacked neatly against the walls, old furniture covered in dust. But then, Jack noticed the bed. It wasn't the bed itself that caught his attention, but what was beneath it. A large drawer, partially pulled out, with something inside. He crouched, his heart pounding in his chest as he reached for the drawer. When he pulled it open fully, the sight before him knocked the air from his lungs. There she was, a little girl, no older than 3, but with the gaunt frame of a baby. Her wide, unblinking eyes stared up at him, framed by tangled, matted hair. Her skin was pale, stretched tightly over bones that seemed too fragile to hold her up. She didn't cry, didn't speak, didn't move. She only stared, her silence louder than any scream. Jack was frozen. He tried to process what he was seeing, but his mind rebelled against the horror. Who was this child? Why was she here? And then the truth hit him like a freight train. This wasn't just any child, this was his child. Somehow, in the stillness of that moment, everything he thought he knew about his wife, his family, and his life came crashing down around him. Jack's hands trembled as he reached for his phone, his breath shallow and unsteady. His voice cracked when the operator answered, the words tumbling out in a frantic rush, "There's a child. In my attic. I didn't know, she's my daughter." The disbelief in his own voice was palpable, but the urgency overpowered it. The police assured him they were on their way, but the seconds dragged on, stretching into eternity as Jack stood frozen in the doorway of the attic, unable to look away from the frail figure lying in the drawer. When the officers arrived, the scene that greeted them was enough to silence even the most seasoned among them. They gently lifted the child from her cramped hiding place, her body alarmingly light in their arms. She didn't cry or struggle, she simply stared with those same wide, hollow eyes as if resigned to whatever came next. Jack's world shattered further when Trisha returned home a short while later, bags of groceries in hand. She seemed unbothered by the police cars parked outside, her expression calm as she stepped through the door. When confronted with the horrific discovery, she didn't cry or plead. Instead, she simply shrugged and led the officers to the attic, pointing out the drawer as though she were giving a tour of her home. She explained it all with unnerving composure. The feeding schedule, the routine diaper changes, the loud music to hide her child, each detail delivered as if she were discussing the care of a pet, not her own child. There was no shame, no guilt, no flicker of remorse in her voice. The police pressed her for a reason, desperate to make sense of the senseless. Trisha claimed she had acted out of fear, alleging that Jack had been abusive in the past. She said she hadn't wanted him to know about the pregnancy, that hiding the child was the only way she could protect herself. But the evidence painted a far different picture. There were no signs of abuse in the household, no history, no reports, no corroboration of her claims. Instead, the facts pointed to a deliberate, calculated act of neglect. This wasn't about fear, it was about erasure. Trisha had chosen to keep the child alive just enough to avoid guilt, but had denied her every other right to a life. The child was rushed to the hospital, where her condition horrified the medical staff. Her tiny frame bore the marks of long-term neglect, limbs so underdeveloped they seemed almost skeletal muscles wasted away from lack of use. Severe diaper rash had caused painful open sores. and her swollen abdomen spoke of malnutrition. She was 3 years old, but had the appearance of a baby not yet a year old. She couldn't walk, crawl, or even sit up on her own. Her vocal cords, unused except for muffled cries, had failed to develop. She couldn't speak or form basic sounds. Her condition was a stark testament to the isolation she had endured, a life defined by darkness, silence, and confinement. The doctors worked tirelessly to stabilize her, their hearts heavy with the knowledge of what she had endured. They had seen neglect before, but this was something else entirely. The child's survival, fragile as it was, felt like a small miracle amid an ocean of tragedy. Amid the darkness of her story, the little girl's resilience emerged as a beacon of hope. When she arrived at the hospital, she was a fragile shell of what a 3-year-old should be, a child who had been denied nearly every opportunity to grow and flourish. But with proper care, attention, and love from her caregivers, something remarkable began to happen. In just a matter of weeks, the child who had been silent and motionless for most of her life started to come alive. Her first attempts at speech were halting, soft murmurs that soon gave way to words. She learned to cry for comfort, something she had never been allowed to do before. Her caregivers watched in awe as she began to form connections, reaching out to hold their hands, seeking the warmth and safety she had been denied. Her progress defied expectations. The doctors marveled at her determination, calling her recovery nothing short of miraculous. Though her body bore the scars of neglect, her spirit seemed unbroken, a testament to the resilience of the human heart, even one so young. While the little girl began to heal, Tricia faced the consequences of her actions. Her courtroom defense crumbled under the weight of overwhelming evidence. The story of fear and abuse she had used to justify her horrific choices was dismissed, with investigators finding no support for her claims. Instead, the court saw the truth: a mother who had deliberately erased her own child from existence. Tricia was convicted of child cruelty and sentenced to 7 years and 6 months in prison. For many, the sentence felt too light for the gravity of her crimes, but it was a step toward justice for the daughter she had tried to forget. For Jack and the rest of the family, the road to recovery was far more complicated. Jack, who had unknowingly lived alongside his hidden daughter for years, was left to confront the unimaginable betrayal of the woman he had trusted most. How does a father reconcile the fact that his wife had hidden such a horrifying secret? And then there were the siblings. How does a family explain to children that their mother had hidden their own sister away, robbing her of the love and connection they took for granted? The emotional toll of such revelations weighed heavily on all of them, leaving scars that would linger for years. The little girl's healing journey was a testament to the strength of the human spirit. But for Jack and his children, healing meant something far more complex: a journey through grief, betrayal, and the slow, painful process of rebuilding a fractured family. This case reminds us that the darkest secrets often hide in plain sight. Tricia's daughter is now in the care of loving professionals, making remarkable progress. But her story lingers as a chilling example of how far someone will go to conceal the truth. What drives a mother to such an act? Was it fear, shame, or something more sinister? These are questions we may never fully answer. What do you think? Could this tragedy have been prevented if someone had questioned Tricia's behavior earlier? What can we do to protect the unseen in our own lives? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe to Housevil for more stories that uncover the darkest truths hidden behind closed doors. And as always, I'll see you in the next one.